Not like the Taj Mahal they got up there today. Don't even get me started on the food. Might as well have been eating cardboard. Yeah, it was the pioneer days. Frontier, the Wild West. We were the settlers, and the Russians, well, they were the Indians. You gotta give it to Gordo. He's got something going on there. He's got a stage presence, if you will. Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my For All Mankind Season 2, Episode 2 breakdown. So that you've been warned, it will contain spoilers if you haven't watched the episode yet. And with that out of the way, we can get right to it. Episode 2 is a character-based setup episode, and surprisingly, that's not a bad thing. Turns out I actually care what happens to these characters. And the episode opens with Molly concealing the truth about being exposed to radiation during the solar storm. She tells the crew that she waited 2 hours and 45 minutes before she went out to save Wubbo. Because she took her dosimeter off first, they have no evidence that this didn't happen, and she's doing all this because she doesn't want to be grounded. We hear that in her conversation with Ellen, where she tries to talk her out of sending her home. While she does a pretty good job of presenting her story of how things went down, we can tell that she's been affected by this. She's not feeling good. As far as Wubbo's concerned, his dosimeter registered 200 rems, and that means that he's going to get cancer. As viewers, we know that this means she probably will too, considering how she looks, the effects they use on her scenes, giving us an idea of how this is affecting her. We know she's in trouble, and it makes sense that she would try to hide it because there's nothing that she can do about that at this point. Her protests don't work. Ellen and Molly do go back to Earth. There's a fantastic shot when they're leaving. We see Molly floating there looking out the window, and we can imagine that she's thinking that this is the last time she'll see the moon. On the surface, she looks really shaky. She looks like she's sensitive to the light and the sound. Wayne's there to meet her, and he sort of takes her away from all the commotion. As far as the cast is concerned, Ellen and Molly are our veterans of going to the moon. We heard Ellen say that she's done 4 tours and spent over 700 days at Jamestown Base. And while Ellen seems to be content with that, ready to move on to do something else, Molly definitely doesn't. We saw last episode that Ellen was still married to Larry. All things considered, their sham marriage seems to be holding up. We see them at home here. He has a boyfriend staying the night. They have a whole routine. Ellen isn't surprised by this. Still no sign of Pam or any word of what happened to her. But we do see her transition to her new position. She's on the administration side of things. And we hear Larry tell her that the way to Mars is through Washington, not through being an astronaut on the moon, basically. In a meeting with Margo in the Pentagon, we see her standing up for the Mars program. She says they're 5 years in and already 10 years behind. We get the idea that as far as NASA's concerned, and as far as the Pentagon's concerned, Mars is not their top priority. We don't spend too much time at JSC in this episode, but we do get filled in on some details beyond just seeing Margot's problem-solving skills when she defeats the vending machine in a serious battle. We hear that the threat level is back to DEFCON 5. During the solar storm, it was elevated to DEFCON 3. That meant there were planes in the air. Everyone was at a high level of readiness, and now the Pentagon has eased that off, but they're still concerned. We learned that Gary Hart is a presidential candidate, which is interesting because Reagan is at the end of his second term. The solar storm caused problems for the reactor at Jamestown Base, so they're going to have to refuel that. And we see generally that Margot's stressed in her position. There's that comment, "You'll figure it out, that's what you do." And I think on some level, we're supposed to notice that here. And another thing that really stands out in Margot's story this episode was the reaction she had to the message regarding Aleida. She goes out and asks her assistant, and when asked, she just says, "She's someone I knew from a long time ago." We don't really know what happened there. There must have been a reason that we spent so much time on Aleida in season 1. That had to be a setup for a bigger role in season 2, but we don't know what happened in the meantime or why she's getting this message now. She's definitely thrown off by it though. It's noticeable, and it'll be interesting to learn what that's all about. So to bring back things to Molly, we see her and Wayne golfing with Ed and Karen, and Ed knows better than to believe her story. He says he's known her for a long time, and he says he knows there's no way that she told the truth about waiting in the lava tube. At this point, he's just checking on her. There seems to be a level of kinship, of respect, to the point where he's not going to go tell anybody what he knows. But he is checking, and he does want her to know that he knows that she would have went out there in the radiation. It'll be interesting to see how she reckons with that. We see her projecting things on Wubbo later when she blows up. He leaves the program himself because he feels like he only has a few more years to live, and he doesn't want to spend them there as a part of this program. He probably wants to go home and spend time with his family, people he cares about. Molly is completely opposed to this, but it's obviously more about her than it is about him, considering the secret that she's keeping means that one way or the other, her ticket's punched too. And on top of that, she's probably going to die from cancer, and you can imagine what that would be like sitting in the back of your head. So on her end, we see someone who's trying to hold on, and then on Gordo's end, we see someone who's trying not to go back. We see him at the outpost. He's trying to beat Ed's high score on asteroids, and he's not able to do it. Danny shows up. She's having trouble getting out of her car. We find out that they're all getting together. They do it regularly, and that she has something serious going on. Clayton, her husband, never recovered after the war, after being in Vietnam. We met him in the first season. Apparently, he's committed suicide, and now she's decided that she wants to go back to the moon. It's been 9 years, and Ed tells her that he'll set it up. We get some family time with Gordo. He's still getting used to the idea Tracy's getting remarried, but we see he's pretty excited about his son coming back from the Naval Academy and seems pretty satisfied in that situation. Even when Tracy comes over, they all get along pretty well. Later, whenever they leave, he gets super drunk. He ends up at the outpost. He's a complete mess, and Karen has to call Ed to come over and get him. As they go for a walk, Ed puts it together how messed up Gordo is from their last experience on the moon. He watches Gordo break down. He eventually takes him home and puts him to bed, and we see that he gets the idea that he's going to send Gordo back, and he announces that the next day in their meeting. Gordo is immediately against the idea. He doesn't want to do it, and we can see that his friend is going to make sure that happens. And I'm glad they got this out of the way, because we all saw the trailer. We all knew that Gordo was going to probably do this. Him and Danny were both probably going to go back to the moon. So it's nice that that's underway now, that he can rehabilitate himself somewhat, get ready to go, and hopefully slay the dragon while he's there, right? Confront his demons, learn what he needs to learn so that he can actually move on from it. Without a doubt, my favorite scene in the entire episode is the closing shot. We had this long shot of Molly sitting on a little wall. Gordo walks up and asks to bum a cigarette. Without saying anything, she just pulls one out, lights it for him, hands it off. He sits down, and it's just perfect. And this is really the moment I realized that all that character work that they did in season 1 is finally paying off. I like these guys. Flaws and all, they're all right with me. So we don't get a lot of Karen in this episode, or really much Ed on his own either, but we do get some scenes with their daughter, their adopted daughter, who we know nothing about. She's just sort of there right now at this point. This is probably what I was least interested in this episode. This and the Stevens kids as well. I imagine that this is also setting up something in the future, similar to what I was talking about with the Aleida stuff in season 1. It just feels a little out of place at this point. And we do get a little bit of Tracy. We see that she's doing a modeling gig. She's wearing her suit. She's probably getting paid pretty good money for this, padding out that government paycheck. She seems happy. We know she got married. We see the ring again. Things seem to be going pretty good in that part of her life. She seems to be ducking her responsibilities a little bit in her astronaut training. That may come up later. But there is tension between her and Ed in relation to her not telling Gordo about getting married before she announced it on TV. So it's a little hard to see where they're going with Tracy at this point. She does have a cell phone. That was kind of fun to see. Maybe those are more accessible, more common in the 1983 alternate timeline. And that's really all there is I can say about what happened, given that it is a setup episode. They needed to get Gordo and Danny back in training and get ready to send them back to the moon. It's interesting that Gordo is clearly not happy doing what he's doing. We see him talking to some Shriners here. He looks like he's put on about 40 pounds. He's drinking heavily. But what's interesting is he prefers that over the idea of going back to the moon. He's terrified of that. From what we can gather, Danny seems a lot more gung-ho. As far as the events in her private life, it looks like this is something that really means something to her. And we can't forget about the fact that she made a real sacrifice for Gordo the last time they were there. So I like the setup. Some other things that I wanted to mention. Man, there are so many people on Jamestown Base. This thing is fully staffed at this point. It's something to see, really. And I liked watching Ellen say goodbye to it. She helped build it. She's been there. She's put in time there. It's a part of who she is. And I thought you could feel that when she was getting ready to leave. She's telling herself, I have this other stuff to do on Earth. I think I can be of more use there. But we can see that she has real feelings about the base, about leaving the moon behind. And we can imagine that applies to everybody. I also like that she's the advocate for the Mars missions. I think we're going to see movement there. I think it's inevitable that there will be a Mars program. Maybe not this season, but it is something that will have to happen, and it's good to know that she'll be involved with that. We heard other mentions of the Pathfinder shuttle. There was talk of putting missiles on board, which is on hold for now, according to Paine. But I feel like there's some big reveals coming in that part of the story. We're going to see them continue to progress, new technology, new missions, see how the space program develops under these different circumstances. And I'm excited to see it. I think that's a good place to leave things. We can pick up the discussion in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. Where do you think we're going from here? What did you like the best about this episode? What are you hoping to see in the next? Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.